The first guru that we have to start with, of course, is Dave Ramsey. Love him or hate him, he's definitely one of the most popular financial gurus in the United States. And for the most part, I love Dave, but not everything that Dave says I agree with. Let's go for a walk. We'll start with Dave. You know, I think Dave is a little too conservative with his views on debt. I do think that there's productive debt and there's destructive debt. I completely agree with him on destructive debt, things like credit cards, you know, buying your 20th pair of jeans or whatever, you know, buying too many clothes, buying things that we don't need. If you're putting that on a credit card, yeah, that's destructive debt. Try to cut that out. But if you're buying your first house, you know, that's productive debt. If you're buying a business as an investment, and you're going to run the company, and, you know, most people can't pay cash for something like that, you know, borrowing some money, I think that's productive debt. So, but let's get on to what Dave says about retirement. I think Dave is way too optimistic when it comes to retirement. Dave would basically say, look, the market returns 12% a year, assume inflation's going to be 4%, so you can spend 8% a year. That's about double what I would tell people. I think that's awfully aggressive. Not only does Dave Ramsey say this, but some of you might remember a very famous mutual fund manager by the name of Peter Lynch. And famously in 1995, Peter published in a very popular financial magazine back then. You know, his view was the market does 8%. I'm closer to Peter Lynch's views on the market of 8% a year. And so Peter said, you know, take off a percentage point on that, and you should be able to spend 7% a year. And that's actually was the thing that drove William Bengen to come up with the 4% rule. There was a reporter that reached out to William Bengen and said, hey, this sounds way too optimistic to me. And Bengen ran the numbers and said, yeah, in a lot of cases, people would run out of money. And that's at 7%. So imagine at 8%, it's going to be even worse. So that's Dave Ramsey's views. Like I said, in general, I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey. I can tell you that my 15-year-old daughter actually called into the Dave Ramsey show when I was giving her some advice on saving for college, and she wanted a second opinion on it. Fortunately for me, Dave Ramsey agreed with me. So that's our first guru, and we're going at this from the most aggressive to the least aggressive. So next up on the aggressive stance would be a gentleman by the name of Robert Kiyosaki. You might know him. Most of us know him because he was the author of a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He sold over 40 million books. And, you know, Robert's not a big fan of budgeting. He's not a big fan of saving. You know, his basic approach for retirement is to buy the assets that you need to produce the income that you want to have in retirement. So he doesn't say to save. He doesn't say, you know, you can spend X dollars. He says buy assets that are cash flow producing and use that to match up with what you want to spend. He's not afraid of spending money. So he and Dave Ramsey would be on opposite ends of the corner from a spending and a saving standpoint. So Robert Kiyosaki would say, you know, you want to buy rental properties, you want to buy commercial real estate, you want to buy businesses, cash generating businesses, you want to own dividend paying stocks and see what kind of cash flows those assets can produce, and you use that to fund your retirement. You know, I think it's a strategy that sometimes, you know, there's a saying called, it takes money to make money. And if you have the kind of money where you can buy businesses, you can, you know, invest in commercial real estate. I think for many of us, we could invest in rental real estate, you know, single family homes, something like that. But outside of that, it takes a fair amount of expertise to make sure you're buying the right business. Oftentimes businesses don't just run themselves, right? It takes management effort. So in theory, it sounds great, but you have to have the expertise to be able to do that. You have to have the expertise to get the capital, the debt needed to buy companies and stuff like that. And you also need to know how to run these companies. So Robert Kiyosaki, in my view, his views would be the second most aggressive on this list. And then next up would be somebody that many of us have heard, might be more famous actually than Dave Ramsey, and that's Jim Cramer. And Jim Cramer is actually pretty conservative. He would say that, just like me, he would say it's not enough to save. You also have to invest. And Jim Cramer would say you want to save about 10 to 15%. I think that's low. I think that's practical for most people, but I encourage you to be aspirational in what you save. I encourage you to think about saving 15 to 25% if you can. I know that's super hard to do. I also encourage you to pay off your debts as soon as you can. As you're getting closer to retirement. There's nothing wrong with having like a mortgage, but as you're getting closer to retirement, as you're getting in your 50s, boy, there's a lot of peace of mind if you can pay off your debts. But let's talk about what Jim Cramer would say. First off, as I said already, it's not enough to save. You have to invest. He would say save 10 to 15% of your income, and he would say put 2/3 of your savings into a retirement account that maybe you're working with a fee-only financial advisor, or you're using low-cost exchange-traded funds. And then, Jim Cramer's a stock picker. He's got a show on CNBC, which is a cable news outlet that focuses on the stock market. And so Jim's thing is own individual companies, own a diversified portfolio. He'd shock you with how few stocks he thinks that you need to own. I'll put a link to a YouTube video where he talks about his views on retirement saving, but he would say 5 or 6 companies is all you need. So 2/3 of what you save goes into your retirement accounts to be invested, and then up to 1/3 can be discretionary, in a discretionary taxable account that he would tell people, go ahead and manage your own account. And if you've got the expertise to do it, that's great. If you don't have the expertise, just be careful, because as that money builds up, making a mistake can get super costly very quickly. Okay, next up is Susie Orman. Susie Orman. And she is even more conservative. So again, we're getting more conservative as we go down this list. Susie Orman would follow William Bengen's recommendation of 4%. You can spend 4% of what you have. That includes taxes, though. That's a gross number. And she would say, the sustainable withdrawal rate, this 4%, every year you increase it by the rate of inflation so that you maintain your purchasing power. But Susie would say, hey, for the first 2 or 3 years, don't increase how much you're taking out of your account. She's really trying to have you protect that nest egg, which, there's nothing wrong with being a little extra cautious. And then she would also say to have like a 2 to 3 year cash flows, retirement cash flows, in cash, in something, I shouldn't say cash, in something that's not going to move up and down with the market. As we all saw in 2022, 60-40 portfolios, bonds got hurt. So, essentially, I think Susie would say keep it in cash or cash-like instruments. Right now with interest rates higher, you can get a decent return on your bank account if you shop around. So I think that's kind of the spirit of what Susie's talking about there. So fairly conservative, essentially spend about 4% of what the value of your account. Okay, and now it's time for me to share my views. Regular viewers of the channel, it's not going to be surprised. I believe in looking at the data. I believe in looking at the studies. William Bengen did a great study. It says about 4%. There's also a gentleman by the name of Guyton, Guyton, Jonathan Guyton. And what Jonathan said is it's just human nature. In years where the stock market goes negative, don't give yourself a raise. Don't increase the amount of the distributions that you take out from your retirement accounts. And if you do that, instead of spending 4% a year, you can spend 5% a year. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that's 25% more. So I think that's a big difference. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think folks should consider working with a fee-only financial advisor. Just Google that term for information on that. The other thing I would say is when you work with an advisor, we have a tool that we use. It's a statistical tool that tells you, what the likelihood is that your plan will succeed, right? So you have a 90% likelihood the plan will succeed, 95%, 80%, whatever the number is. I would say the cost from going from an 80% likelihood of a plan achieving to the cost, having there's never 100%, 95%, 97%. The cost of that is measured not in dollars, but in years, to go from an 80% likelihood to a 95% likelihood. Well, it really is done in dollars, but for most of us, we have to save additional money. So for me personally, if I had an 80% likelihood of achieving my goals, or I could keep working for another 5 to 7 years and bring that likelihood up to 95 or 97%. For me personally, I'm not you, but for me, it's not worth that trade-off. I would retire sooner. And on that, I should say this is not financial advice. This is for education for you. I don't know your situation. Unfortunately, I cannot give you financial advice, but you can help me out. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and leave comments. I love reading your comments. And if you like today's video, I know you're going to like this video up here where I talk about the average income in retirement, and this video down here, which is 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.